as the crow flies on the Vance Crowe podcast.
There was a paper one time that I read not all that long ago, maybe a year ago or so, called Bullshit Jobs. And in it, the guy, he's making a case about politics that I'm not actually making, but he makes the case about how there's a big percentage, some might say 40%, some might say 60% of the white collar class in the United States have completely bullshit jobs. They don't actually do anything at work, and maybe they have 4 hours or 5 hours of work, but we actually have automated away all of their work, because once we had computers and cell phones and email, you could compress the amount of work that it took administrative people to do, or even a professional. The amount of work that they have to do to accomplish their goals is way, way down. And yet they keep their jobs and they work the 4 hours a week, but then they go to meetings that are endless where they don't actually have the power to make decisions. They have to, there's just a group of people that get together that say, my boss is going to want to know about this and weigh in. So then they go away and then they come back and they make the most tiny of changes. And then the other people are saying there's a bunch of jobs where we're trying to tabulate and prove that we are getting work done. And so we spend all of our time counting impressions or, customer survey things and collating this data. And then you have to have managers of people that are collating that data. And then those managers have to have managers. And so he's basically saying we have a welfare system among the white collar class, because if you're in a regulated industry, the government wants to see you adding jobs, not taking them away. So they're not trying to slough off the dead weight, because they need to have those people there, because the government, in order to give them the regulations to do whatever it is, maybe water quality or different chemicals you're using, that's the arrangement, is that you have to keep those people on. Have you ever heard that idea?
No, yeah. Well, from you like a week ago.
I'm totally enthralled by the idea. It could be completely wrong, but I saw a lot of that going on in the corporation, like whether it was the World Bank or Monsanto. Like, there are really highly competent people, but they don't have the work that they're doing is nowhere near what they're capable of.
Right. Oh no, yeah, 100%. Like, that's those are the compromises not even a compromise, because then that's where I'm trying to be conscious of, like, not making compromises to be made just because they have, quote unquote, not quote unquote like social impact, but like, quantifying things that don't matter. I think like that's the key, maybe one of the key ideas of like a lot of those positions. It's like counting, I'm doing data analytics, blah, 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 or not data analytics. Data analysts have their space for sure. Like, I'm managing my data, especially now, probably like 40% of my day, but like counting numbers that don't matter to put together plans that will have no impact on return to shareholders, like all of that waste.
Sustainability reports.
Yeah,
sustainability reports. And that's an unpopular opinion, because people are going to say, hey, we want to know how much carbon they're emitting. But there are hundreds, thousands of people in the United States that all they are doing is counting numbers that are almost uncountable. Or if they are countable, it's so abstract and so complicated that you could throw thousands of accountants at it, which is what they're doing. Not only do you have people that are tabulating for these sustainability reports, but then you have the people that make the reports, and then you have the people that audit the reports, and then you have the lawyers that look over it. And it is all a giant tax for a document that maybe people demand that they want, but nobody reads that thing.
Right. Yeah. You take the high level blurb, and it's like, if we understand the high level problem of why we're counting those numbers, or maybe not even the problem, but the high level, whatever we need to understand to be able to act on that data, then we don't need to know the granulars and waste the resources on those granulars. And I think, like, to your point, that's a lot of what happens at that stage, is because of, keeping people busy, whatever it might be, we're worrying and allocating time, money, and attention, which is worth more than the latter two, to counting up those numbers. And like, if you get the concepts, like I can't remember if we talked about it a lot, but something I think a lot about, like, especially like trying to run a company, is like depth versus like span knowledge. Like Ken Wilber, who's like a Jungian, guy, like he's kind of dissolved some of Jung's ideas into his books, but he talks about like depth versus span as it pertains to consciousness and some other things. But I think about it as it pertains to knowledge and like, time allocation to your practice. Like if you have the high level concept, do you need to know the granulars to be able to act, moving forward, especially as a company? Like both have their place. Specialists have their place, but and then I guess that's where it goes back to a company perspective. Like I don't need to know 100% of how to program or 100% of marketing or 100% of sales or 100% of operations. But if I know like 10% of each to make up the whole picture and I have that span, then you're able to delegate very, very effectively in each of those like kind of respective like, vertical silos.
I think that's true. And I would have trouble giving somebody advice that they should rely on their ability to have that span unless they're going to be something like an entrepreneur. Because
that's where like risk and instinct comes into place, is whenever you're acting on span and concepts.
And there's risk in depth, right? Because you could get a depth of some skill that's completely not needed, or the technology just gets blown away.
Right.
But if you become a master at one thing, your ability to transfer that mastery to another thing is generally pretty high.
Yeah.
But when you're in the span business, then you've got to convince somebody, hey, you should trust me that I can blend together these things in a way that will add a synergy, as opposed to stand atop of this group and dictate to you how things ought to be.
Sure. Yeah. And I think both has their value. And that's sort of like the dichotomy and like the whole picture comes into place, and that you can't have like a holistic system without both. Like if anybody in an organization is a span player, then there's no depth execution. But if the right people to be span players are in those positions, then they're able to have a broader understanding of the full picture to be able to make the decisions that need to be executed at like the vertical level, I guess.
And maybe I have like, you could probably tell in my voice, I have an amount of polarity about the sustainability issue, because I see people that were like me. When I was in college, it wasn't global warming, it was poverty. And it was like, look at the people in these places far away. And that inspired me. And I went to Africa, right? And I joined the Peace Corps to try and help poor people that were far away. I see these kids taking on huge amounts of college debt, unimaginable amounts of college debt, to become an expert in a thing that if the company wasn't in whatever position they're in to be producing those sustainability reports, that job wouldn't exist. And furthermore, they are never actually going to, their skill is so amorphous that it's not deep, but they've paid to have deep skills, and they're not an engineer, they're not a chemist, they're not a nurse.
Yeah, and you can say it doesn't matter. What they've gotten that depth knowledge is, it doesn't matter. And nobody told them when they were young and idealistic that they were making that decision, that what they're investing tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars in does not matter and will not pay them the rest of their lives.
Right. And
period.
And even if it does, even if some college administrator says, or these companies would show up, and to show up well to the students, they say, look how sustainable we are. Look at all these jobs we have in sustainability. We're looking for sustainability people.
Right.
But it's terminal. There's nothing down there. It's not like, hey, if you are a chemist and you come to our company, even if we get rid of that product or that way of thinking, there are a lot of other things that you could do in chemistry.
Sure.
And so I see huge volumes of talent get engaged in that. They then know that they have to keep the charade going, that these sustainability reports, and I'm not saying there's no value in knowing whether or not you're getting better at less polluting, but the way that they're structured, if you actually go read one, and most people I would say have never read even one.
Talk in circles.
Right.
Yeah.
They talk in circles. And then this person who has something to add to the world now feels stuck, and they have to convince themselves, they have to ignore their daemon, which is telling them this is a waste of time. You're recording meaningless numbers. They have to, muffle that down, and then they continue in the charade.
Yeah. No,
I could be wrong. I don't want to I could be totally wrong here. I'm just one guy's opinion, but it breaks my heart when I hear kids telling me they're doing sustainability stuff, because I think they're screwed.
Yeah. And you could apply that same thought process to a number of other industries. And that's like, I guess, part of like where my anxiety came into play in terms of like, biomedical engineering is pretty practical. Like could have floated around, but making that decision and taking on those debt decisions, like at an age where I had no idea what I wanted to apply it. And I've known since I was in high school that I would never work, a 9-to-5 the rest of my life. So to be going down that kind of college path, insinuating that was the case, like thankfully acknowledged that it was a problem very, very quickly. And
I could never have done what you did. There's no way. I mean, like I went to college, had no idea what I wanted to be, but knew I needed that degree from a brand that would be good for me, that would allow me to hold my head up high. It was essentially going and buying a mask.
Yeah.
I will say this though. Now, at this point in my life, probably in the last 6 months to a year, I've started to use my philosophy background that I had to have at Marquette, and it has transformed my life. So thank God I did get it, because I don't know how I would have gotten the foundational background. You can, maybe just, library card. But I think there are a lot of people that do that, and I think it's a charade.
Yeah.
And I had no business taking out the level of loans I took out. I had no, and that's why I don't hold those kids. Like we talk shit about these kids taking out these huge college loans.
We don't know what we're doing. See, that's why I only last as long as I did, because I never took out a loan. I did the savings thing, and then it got to the stage where a loan was gonna have to be taken out, and I'm very, very debt averse. Like I'm not afraid of a lot of things, but I'm afraid of the idea of debt.
What made you afraid of debt?
Deep question. Yeah.